Welcome back to another episode of With the Chiefs. This week we are continuing the How to Run Any Distance series, and we're going to be focusing on the 10K. We've got with us today Rosy Cooper, who is an absolute incredible runner. Rosy is originally from England in the UK and grew up as a bit of a talented athlete. She was in the Olympic cycling junior talent squad for the next Olympics. I think they were kind of targeting, but she, I think, finished school and kind of fell out of the sport a little bit. Had a couple of down years, I think, like a lot of people. It's very relatable. Just partying in your 20s. Me and Smitty kind of went on a similar journey.
Absolutely.
But then
Even.
after I think it was around a 10-year hiatus, she started back up in the sport, decided to run a half marathon, and from there it's just been up and up for Rosy. She's now considered probably on the borderline elite sort of athlete. Has started her own coaching program and has ran a 35-minute 10K, I think 16:20 something 5K, and
Wow.
is currently targeting the marathon, I think. But welcome to the show, Rosy. How are you going?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for having me, Dominic. It's really exciting to be on here, and that was a very flattering intro.
I love how you made a comparison, Dom, like we've been through. I don't remember last time I was targeting the Olympics or but
I think we're a bit generous.
we can leave that comparison out.
Yeah, how did you guys get that? Was that on? How did you find out about the cycling?
Oh, I was just digging
Dom.
around. Yeah, we had a look through your little blog. That's really good. Some pretty cool information there. I think anyone listening should check that out, definitely.
Thank you. Good plug.
But, what was it like kind of growing up as a cyclist and being that in that sort of environment?
So I think it really started. My family were like all about sport, and I honestly don't know what we would have done if we weren't into sport. There's 4 of us, and we basically made a competition out of anything. I mean, I can remember like Dad pitching up to like family holidays on the beach with like a javelin in the back of the car and like clearing the beach. So there were 4 of us, super competitive. We competed at anything, and I think we always sort of cycled because my brothers were 2 and 4 years younger, and they were pretty strong and pretty fearless on bikes. We always sort of would race on bikes. We'd mountain bike, we'd road bike, etc. And that kind of continued through my teens. But to be honest, when I actually got onto that program, I was actually more of a runner. But they came to our school at the time, and they sort of put a bunch of sporty kids on bikes, and they did a 3-minute max effort test, and I think a 30-second one from memory. And they pulled like all this data, and they basically just called my dad a couple of weeks later and were like, yeah, she's sort of like born to cycle if you want, like cardiovascularly, and I've always had quite kind of strong legs. So I got onto the program really briefly, but at the time I was training for multi-events, so hurdles, high jump, long jump, shot put. I was actually quite a decent shot putter back in the day.
Really?
Just from marathon running. But yeah, so I was pretty torn at the time. I think I was 15, and I had this sort of route to 2012 Olympics, which obviously was a home Olympics at the time. But I was actually doing quite well with my athletics as well. So I was only on the program for about 6 months. But it was a pretty cool experience. And I always say this to people: if you can push yourself on a bike, have you guys ever done a 20-minute max effort test on a bike?
No, never.
I think maybe once.
It's about as tough as it gets, I think. And I would include a hard 5K in that, because you are literally staring at a screen and your legs are cooked from 5 minutes in, and you got nowhere to go, and there's no changing gradient, and there's no wind. And it kind of does give you some pretty, like, I've got a lot of respect for top level cyclists. Like, what they put their bodies through is quite phenomenal. So it was an amazing experience. I think probably what it did show me was that, physiologically quite sort of fairly talented at sport. But ultimately I sort of chose athletics because that was always really where my passion was. But then I got a foot injury ended up being quite long term. So I sort of lost that power that you need for the high jump, long jump, shot put, hurdles world. So then I sort of had a brief foray into middle distance running as a 16-year-old, 15, 16-year-old, and did fairly well in that. I got a good result at the British Champs, and that was pretty cool. But then, yeah, I think it all just sort of, in my 20s, it all got quite exciting quite quickly. And I think maybe I was in that sort of level where I was 16, I was probably top 20 in the UK, maybe, I think. But I wasn't top 3 or top 5. And at that point, you've got to make big sacrifices. You're saying no to social, in some ways you're saying no to a social life. And I didn't feel I was quite good enough to warrant that in athletics, possibly in cycling if it had been where my passion was. I sort of fell out of competitive sport, but I don't think I ever lost that. I think if you learn to push yourself quite young, I think that's quite useful, because I even with the athletes I work with, it's quite an exercise kind of explaining how, that's okay. Like, you can feel really cooked at rep 2 of 10, or that sort of ability to kind of push through. I don't think you sort of lose that. And again, when we were kids, it was all about, you sort of did sport to win, or to at least perform better than you did last time. My dad was big on we're hugely competitive. So yeah, I think that all carried through. And physiologically, I think as well, if you do high level sport in your teens, perhaps it doesn't really go anywhere. But yeah, it was a good sort of 12 years, I think, before I got back into running on any sort of consistent level. My now fiance, sort of, we met out here, and he persuaded me to sign up to Blackmore's half marathon. And in hindsight, I don't know what we were thinking. I think we ran twice before it. It's just, first of all, he outran me in the last 2K, which ended in a bit of a lover's tiff, should we say? But and I think I ran 1:45, but I was so sort of grumpy about the whole thing that I think I lost my my tracking number along the way. But yeah, and then we joked that was the kind of start of everything, because Gaz beat me. Yeah.
Gee,
That's awesome.
That's an awesome background.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say, just while I'm thinking of it, like when you push yourself at a young age, it makes a difference. Like, you have to, like when I started, you have to
Yeah.
learn to push your body, because it just, like, for example, you're doing kilometer repeats and it hurts, like you said, at rep 2, and you have to learn that you can keep. That's an interesting point, because it took me personally a while to learn. But Dom, you're the same in that regard, because you've been doing athletics for a while as well. So did you have that
Yeah,
similar experience?
I think so. And I think, like, training for middle distance, you really experience that pain.
Yeah.
Training for the 800, it was just like, oh, every session was grueling, and felt like, I don't know, your head was just spinning afterwards, and you felt like throwing up, like, after every session
Yeah.
almost. So that teaches you that sort of lesson of pain tolerance pretty quickly. And I think that's definitely helped in training now as well, and my mindset moving forwards. But
100%.
each week we've kind of just been starting each episode off running through what our training weeks have been like at the moment. Would you mind kind of digging into like what you're training for, and what you did in the last week?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a great week, because I finally think, and I say this cautiously, but I might have nailed the reprieve week. So,
Nice one.
do you guys have reprieve weeks in your training kind of schedules?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but more so just like when I'm feeling absolutely fried, I'll say, okay,
Do
that's
that.
enough.
Yeah, got you.
Yeah.
So I think last year and it's probably a separate sort of stream of chat, but I got quite badly injured, and I look back and I think what I thought was a reprieve week was like, right, I'll just shave off a few reps here, cut a 4K off my long run. I say the word reprieve, and it was probably a very tenuous reprieve. Whereas this year, I'm like, right, everything I've read is that you got to kind of halve almost halve your training from a running point of view. So I've done that this week, and I've been bouncing off the walls. I felt great. Like, my swimming's been good, my weights training's been good. My partner says I've been like doing more housework than normal. So yeah, reprieve weeks, highly recommend. But if I talk about a normal training week, and again, I've made a heap of changes this year after last year, but I probably typically have Monday off. I might do like a swim and some yoga maybe every other week, but then every second Monday I try and have a total rest. I find it's quite good mentally. Tuesday I'll try and, is the only day I double, but I'll try and do some quite quality low volume speed work in the morning. And then I run on the Alter G, which is I don't know if you guys have done it, the reduced body weight treadmill. I've got access to one of those in the city, so I do that after a weight session in the afternoon, which is quite good. Wednesday I'll steady run and bike for 90 minutes usually. Thursday I'm starting to do a bit of hill work with Delta, which is cool, because I think definitely one thing I'm trying to work on this year is my running form, because it's not the best, should we say. So yeah, do that. Then I have weights in the evening, and what I'm trying to do this year is keep my running moderate on a Thursday, but supplement with a pretty brutal cross training session. Friday's full recovery, like I might do 8K at reduced body weight on the Alter G, maybe a swim, so it's the sort of non-impact. Saturday I'm trying to make my other hard run but combine it with a long run, so I'll do 20 to 30K but with efforts. I find that works quite well. I find my body doesn't cope brilliantly with 2 sessions plus a big long run, so I find if I can combine them, it works quite well. And then on Sundays, sort of like a social run, usually with Gareth, who's my boyfriend. So I typically I'm trying to hit 5 hours cross training a week at the moment, which is quite a lot.
Wow.
But then keep my mileage lower, and then also doing 3 hours of strength and conditioning. So it's probably not a traditional running or training week, but I had to make some big changes off the back of last year. So and so far I'm finding it pretty good, pretty effective.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that's typically how my week looks.
Yeah, awesome.
That's a very unique training week in terms of the cross training.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I think it goes back to sort of what I was saying before, because I have that background in cycling and swimming to a lesser degree, but I feel like I can get a lot out of myself on a bike, whereas it's sort of that concept of relative perceived effort. So if you've done a lot of running, they say the pros can actually, what would feel really painful to us or to someone, it sort of goes down in levels, but you learn to tolerate more pain the more you do a sport, and it's sort of subconscious. So I think when I've had athletes and they're injured and I'm saying, right, let's get on a bike, let's get your heart rate up, let's, knock out these efforts, etc. It's actually quite hard for people who've never done that type of training before. So I'm finding cross training for me personally works pretty well, because I can work pretty hard, just take a little bit less out my body.
Yeah, interesting.
Awesome. I love that the measurement of how much housework you're doing is how well you're recovering.
I don't know about you guys, but particularly marathon training, when you've done a big long run, especially with efforts, or if you've knocked out 30 plus, I'm useless.
Yeah, you kind of feel in the morning, like after it, you feel good, but then like as the day rolls on, you're just like, I'm cooked. I just want to go. I just want to go to bed.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to eat and sleep and not have conversations that aren't about running usually.
This sounds spot on to me.
Yeah.
What about your week, Dom, leading into what you're going to do this weekend?
Yeah, so currently I'm down at Bright, Victoria for Buffalo Stampede. I'm running the marathon here, so it'll be my first trail marathon, which is pretty exciting. So this week was just a pretty big taper week, but I've still kind of just been trying to double each day for 20 minutes. So 2 20-minute runs every day. I think that's just been working well for me in terms of routine and just reminding myself to keep running all the time. And I found it works quite well with your schedule and doesn't take as much out of you if you're just doing little 20-minute runs. So yeah, I just ran twice pretty much every day, and then I did a session on Tuesday. We did 3 by 10 minutes. And then, but the last one I was feeling like I was just working a little bit too hard, so I changed it to just a 5-minute effort, and then I ran with someone else from the squad a little bit slower. So yeah, just to make sure I wasn't overdoing it. And then the other session I did was on Thursday. I've got a friend who wanted to do a 10K time trial, so I said, "Oh yeah, I'll help pace you." So I just got out and paced him for I think it was like 3:45s for 10K. So
Nice.
that was another good little.
That was Arthur, was it? From
Yeah,
Delta?
Arthur. Yeah. So yeah, it was good to get out with Arthur and run a little 10K, and yeah, it's awesome just seeing people run PBs. Like it just meant so much to him. I think he's been training really hard, and it all kind of paid off with this 10K time trial, and then he's going to go do Canberra Marathon, and I think that that's been a good confidence boost for him. But yeah, we drove down on Friday. It was like a 8-hour car trip, which was pretty brutal. And then just went out for a few more easy jogs once we got down here. But that's been it. Pretty much just jogging around and a couple of small sessions. What about you, Smitty? What have you been
Me,
up to?
just before I go into my week, which car did you take? Is the brake pad still
Yeah.
screaming at you for 8 hours? That'd be incredibly. It's like makes this rattling noise, and is it your car?
yeah, we took my car, of course. But yeah, no, it's done some mileage now. I think like over 200,000 Ks. But
Impressive.
yeah, I think I'll get those brake pads fixed eventually. There's
I'm
nothing wrong
glad
with
I
like
got to chuck that in there.
performance-wise, they're fine. Just let me clarify that. Performance-wise, it's just the like I don't know,
Yeah.
something's rattling. But yeah, the mechanic said it's fine. It's just like a static thing. What about you, Smitty? Yeah, how's your week
Jeez.
going?
Good. I had after the 5K time trial, what I did a bit of a long run, something a little bit easier, more steady on Sunday, then just easy Monday. Tuesday was a bit of a monster session for me, at least. It was 6 by 2K at sort of like a threshold effort, and because I'm now using power instead of like my heart rate, it's different intensity. Like it's pretty much it's harder than I thought. So like it feels hard, like threshold at I guess more accurate using power just feels a little bit harder because my heart rate was like spiking quite a lot. So typically in that scenario, I would have pulled back. But it was good. Like it was a good session. I did kind of blow up on the last rep. Like the last rep, I blew out to like 4-minute Ks and had a stitch. But I think the overall effort was good, so I was happy with that. Then Wednesday, easy. Thursday was the last sort of excuse me, max effort testing. So I just did some sprints, like 10-second, 15-second, and 20-second sprints, which I haven't done like that sort of sprinting in ages. I was quite sore on Friday, like because just the body is not used to literally sprinting at all. Like I can't. I don't think I've ever done outside of 200s
Yeah.
like sprinting. So and then what was it? Yeah, Friday easy, Saturday easy. I've got a monster session tomorrow, which I'm not sure how it's going to go. And I'm not sure if I'm reading it correctly as well. It's like, okay, so
Never
it's
a good sign if you have to.
I'll tell you what, Sally did say like this is going to sting. So it's probably correct. Um it's like 10-minute warm up, 20-minute at almost like sort of half marathon pace, maybe a little bit slower. So it's like still a good tempo. Then 2 minutes recovery. Then 4 by 5 minutes with a 2-minute float. 5 minutes being at like almost like 10K pace, I would say, or maybe a bit slower. Then off the back of that, another 20 minutes at half marathon pace. Does that sound
Yeah,
right?
jeez. So it's like
So
over an hour at half marathon pace.
of like, I'm keen to see if I can do it at the prescribed power. It'll be interesting if I can get that one in the bag. I think I'll be in good shape to go potentially sub 75 at Canberra. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that, and overall a good week. I'm enjoying using power as opposed to anything else. Just it feels good. Sort of his typically I'd be looking at sort of the watch, checking my heart rate and gauging effort based on that. But I guess you can kind of glance at and just um, glance at your watch and see that you're going at a certain power metric and worry about nothing else, which I find has helped mentally, especially in a session. But yeah, that's me for the week. I think I waffled on a bit, but
Yeah, that's good.
So you're racing Canberra?
yeah, I'm racing Canberra.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm keen for that.
Nice.
It'll be good.
Find a good windbreak if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully. Um, yeah, so I guess we will go into the training for. So we're going to target like one of your 10K races when I think it was last May, if I'm correct, the
Yeah.
Sydney 10.
Sydney 10. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long did you give yourself to train for the race in terms of a block? Do you remember if it was like
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was actually pretty disappointed with that race.
Oh, wow.
And I only say that because
hang on?
well, no, I mean, I've got so little race experience because in 2000 I started running a lot in 2019,
Mm.
and then it's my first stress fracture, and then I did race Melbourne, which actually was really good, but then COVID hit. So I think there's been so few races I've actually done. I mean, when I look at Sydney 10, actually, because I got quite grumpy about my result, and my dad said, check your result from last year, and it was actually 40 minutes. So it was
Yeah,
was
this is
5 minutes
massive.
PB.
Huge
So yeah,
PB.
I shouldn't say that, but I felt that I got in much better shape kind of a month or so later. But with Sydney 10, I'd been targeting Canberra half. That was sort of my big race. But
Yeah.
it sounds like I'm always injured, and I'm actually not. But I'd just been coming back from injury, so I started training in the January and tried to get pretty fit pretty quickly for Canberra, and sort of raced okay in Canberra. It was probably where I was at, and then rolled an ankle in April. Oh no, just yeah, in April, rolled an ankle, had 2 weeks off running, and then we had 2 weeks to go to Sydney 10, and it was more of a right. Well, I've sort of got nothing to lose, might as well race, bit of a benchmark type situation. So in terms of how I target a 10K, that probably wasn't the perfect.
Okay, so using it as a benchmark to teach people how to run a
Yeah,
10K, you wouldn't be totally happy with that, but I
no,
guess the result still speaks for itself. So something previously, like there must have been still a good block of training. But
yeah, I think you probably someone made the point to me the other day. You're actually so much better undercooked than overcooked. You can actually run fairly well if you've been forced to take 2 weeks off because of an injury or whatever it is. I think actually we're all so obsessed with kind of that final training session or hitting the exact pace for the final session you do on the Tuesday or the Sunday. And actually, when you've been forced to sort of take quite a bit of rest, sometimes your legs actually can surprise you. So it was a pretty good result considering the lead up. But if I talk about a 10K like this year, I've got a much better plan.
okay, well
Shall I
maybe
talk about that?
let's talk about that then, I guess,
Yeah.
as a
So,
benchmark. Yeah.
so I've got this. Have you guys read The Science of Running?
Right.
No.
I read it on holiday, and it didn't make for the best kind of conversation with Gaz, who wasn't that into running at the time. But anyway, he talks about that. I got a lot of stick about that, but he talks about this this principle of pyramid training, where if you think about a pyramid and you've got your 10K race at the top, and then you come down either side, where at the very bottom of each side you've got a 100-meter sprint on one end, and then like a slow 2-hour run on the other. And then up each stage of the pyramid, you've got like, right, 200-meter repeats down tempo, 400-meter repeats up tempo. And you go all the way up until you're basically doing quite long repeats with short recoveries and then quite long threshold work. Does that
Okay.
make sense? And that, to me, is really where the gold lies in terms of 10K training. Because if you can knock out kind of, mile repeats off 75 seconds, or I did 12 by 1K even at just under race pace off 60 seconds, or, kind of
Jeez.
quite meaty volume sessions, but quite
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the pyramid, you kind of got, like, I did quite a few 10-mile tempos last year. I tried to do one a month, 10-mile threshold, actually. So not that far off half marathon pace.
Right.
So it's a big run. But I feel like that's really where you kind of want to, that's the work you want to be putting in like a month or two out.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've built up the foundation of kind of like lower volume speed and sort of the big long runs. You sort of built your engine, built your speed, and then you combine them to get your long reps at speed
Yeah.
and your
So
threshold work.
before you start doing that, how far out is that where you're doing the speed like you're talking about before you start going into those bigger sessions?
So a lot of the research I've read is 24 weeks. So there's a
Mm.
24-week period between, this obviously comes from a fairly good level of fitness, but if you're starting, if you look at a race 24 weeks out, and then you kind of do 6 to 8 weeks foundation work,
Yeah.
maybe 8 to sort of 18, is where you're really kind of in your peak training with reprieve weeks every 4 weeks, and then
Mm-hmm.
from sort of 18 to 24 you start that kind of sharpening up phase. So that's pretty long build, and that would
Yeah.
possibly be a little bit more relevant for marathon, but the same kind of principle applies. So maybe if a 10K, if you said 15 to 20 weeks out, you start being like, right, I've got a really aggressive goal. I'm going to do 5 weeks of foundation work, and then we're going to hit sort of a 6 to 8 week block, but maybe with two recovery weeks,
Mm.
before I start kind of just that 2 week period where you let the legs freshen up. So
Mm.
that's probably where, if I was like, if 10K was my number one goal, I'd be yeah, 20 weeks out, I'd be sort of in phase one, and then 12 to 15, sort of 12 weeks out, I'd be trying to hit peak phase.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. Like normally when I think of shorter distances, like I haven't had that longer term mental approach. Like you think marathon and you think 18-week block, but that's a good point that you're actually thinking about it much earlier on.
Yeah,
Um,
it's super
um,
individual. I think, like, I've always been someone who can run, particularly being a girl. I can run quite fast, quite easily. Like, I've never struggled with, 400-meter repeats sort of thing. But where I've
mhm.
definitely been weaker is sustaining a fast pace, because 10Ks is super fast, really. Like, when you actually
Yeah.
think about it,
Mm.
because it's so close
Yeah.
to 5K race pace
Yeah.
that you've got to do it twice.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I was gonna include that question. Is
Yeah,
like how, because 10K pace is like, to me, I've thought about this as it's one of the most painful races because you're on. It's almost like a 5K effort, a little bit slower. So you're on the limit. Like if you race
yeah.
it, you're on the limit for a long time. What feels like a long time.
Yeah,
Um.
and you kind of, I think it was Jerome was talking about how, actually maybe it was Alex was saying, when you get into that kind of race mindset and you can take yourself to another level,
Mm.
I feel like you kind of got to be doing that from
Yeah.
4K
Yeah.
onwards.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
You have like 2K, or this is my experience at least. 2K is like okay. It's like almost like, but then it just starts hurting, and like you're hurting the whole.
yeah,
Is that like your experience as well? That's not just me, is it? Because it's like hurts
Yeah.
badly.
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
I did a time trial out at Delta with Delta. I think it was at Penrith, and I run a 38-minute 10K. And I ran 35 that day. So it was a time trial. It was not official, but so I took 3 minutes off. And I remember being in this mindset where I've never felt like so ready to hurt.
mm, Yeah.
And it starts hurting, but I think when you're in that kind of elevated like
Yeah.
psyche,
Yeah.
you almost get into this like bring it on space. And I think if you can get into that mindset on a start line, you're
Mm.
almost always going to run well,
Mm.
providing you don't go out
Yeah,
too
definitely.
hard.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so hard, and
Yeah.
it's such like a
Uh,
challenging event. Like I've had 10Ks where I've gotten to 5K and just said, "Nah, like I'm pulling out." And you hate
Yeah,
yourself afterwards, but
yeah,
like it's just you need to be in that mindset, otherwise you're not going to finish the race. Almost like it's so important. And I think you were talking about it
yeah.
before, like with your cycling, how you sort of had a bit of experience like dealing with pain when you were younger, and yeah, I think that's just such like an overlooked point sometimes. Just being in the right mindset. Um, yeah. Are there any
Yeah.
like I don't know tips or
I
tricks
think
that you use to kind of fire yourself up?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a good one I use with clients. The rule of thirds. So the first third should be comfortable, the middle third should be uncomfortable, and the third you just hang on.
Mm.
Because once you really get to 7K, it isn't that long.
Yeah.
You just got to dig in. And I say that to clients all the time. If you just at 5K, stop thinking about 5 to go, think about 2 to go, get to 7K, and then you
Yeah.
kind of past the quitting point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you've always got, they've done heaps of studies, but the way your body and mind interact to like moderate the effort based on how long you've got to go
Mm,
Mm.
is wild. So they've done studies where like people, the second they know they're on for a record or a qualifying time or whatever, they just find this extra. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of like that kind of any thought that comes into your head in a 10K, if it's like my legs are heavy, I'm breathing too much, people are passing me, if you're ready with like a cue
mm,
just to bite back. So your legs are tired, so what?
yeah.
They've been tired in training.
Mm.
I'm breathing heavy, you're supposed to be breathing heavy. It's a
Yeah.
you're supposed to be in the red zone, people are
Yeah.
passing me. I can pass them back, whatever. um, Whatever the cue is. But I feel like you've got this, when you're tired, you've got that split second to start like fighting back to the voice in your head that's saying, this is
Yeah.
horrible, what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah. If you let that energy run, like
Yeah,
those voice, like you can go down sort of a negative rabbit hole. So that
Mm,
is especially when you're hurting.
yeah. But from a kind of training point of view, the top tips would be, yeah, long reps, short recovery, and
mm,
meaty threshold work. Like,
Mm.
because you kind of got to be able to hold. It's all very well being able to knock out 3 minutes of work and then have a rest and knock
mm,
out another 3 minutes of work, and that's great. But you've also got to be able to hurt for 30 minutes, 40
yeah.
minutes, 50 minutes without a break.
Yeah.
So that's like, they're your two. That's what you got to be doing, I think,
Mm.
if you want to run a fast 10K.
The threshold efforts, what are they? How do you gauge that? Because a lot of people have a lot of different ways of gauging that effort.
So I tend to, depending on the level of the athlete, but I find threshold typically around half marathon,
Mm.
because it's sort of just below that tipping point
Mm.
where you start to get the heavy legs.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so I find, if you can, I try to do a monthly 10-mile threshold myself.
It's a big run.
It's a big run, and to be honest, again, I overtrained last year quite substantially, so I may not do that this year. But
Mm.
they get you fit.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
putting in a 16K at half marathon effort
Yeah.
every month, you get pretty fit.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I'd say thresholds maybe depending on the level of the runner, but 10 to 15 or 10 seconds off goal 10K pace.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to break 35, you want to be, running 10-mile threshold somewhere around the 340,
Yeah.
low 340 mark.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and so if we can go into maybe the pointy end of training in terms of like that heavy those heavy stages, if you can, what are some of the key sessions then for you, like maybe some of the shorter stuff, and then also any, I mean obviously we've got the 10 mile threshold, but if there's any other sessions you like in that threshold zone, maybe what some of those are.
Yeah, so we did last year. I was trying to build up to Melbourne Marathon, and we did a lot of. We started at 3x4K, then we did 4x5K, then eventually we were doing 5x5K at marathon pace within the run. So
Wow.
that's more tempo than threshold.
Yep.
But a good one would be 3x5K at threshold within a 25K run with a 1K float. But trying to keep that float to a float, not a jog, because otherwise it's sort of an interval session.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you knock out 3x5K with 3K float, so it's 18K, with the 3x5K efforts at threshold, that's a pretty good one if you want to kind of build up to that in the lead up to a big 10K or a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I love mile repeats. I think they work across the board, whatever distance you're doing. But I like when I look back, I kind of felt like last year, and this sort of has worked a little bit for my athletes as well. I feel like and I don't know about you guys, it's so not linear that you're training and training and training. And there was a point last year, it was probably just after Sydney 10, where everything just got about 10 seconds per K fast, like
Yeah.
everything, apart from the very, very fine sort of speed work. But yeah, mile repeats, threshold. And I think when I look back, what sort of made the difference was, yeah, the 10 miles, but also when you're doing your long repeats, like your Ks, your mile repeats, 2Ks, 3Ks, keeping recoveries tight,
Yep.
and keeping, if you're doing fartlek, keeping the discrepancy between your effort and your float tighter, because you never let your heart rate come down then totally. So you're always sort of just pushing.
Yeah, so it's quite hard training, which is probably how, yeah, because getting fit for a 10K is is challenging. So the mile repeats, are they like hard? Like that's like interval, like 5K, 10K pace, is it?
Yeah, so what I recommend to my clients is, if you were doing between 3 and 5, so if you're doing over 5K volume, they should be at 10K pace. But if we wanted to work on 5K, then we might do two by a mile, but faster. So the second you're kind of going over the volume of the race, you should then be targeting the pace of the race up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because if you do
Um,
5 by a
Yeah,
mile
well,
at
that's
5K
PB
pace, you'd
almost.
be
Like,
cooked.
yeah,
yeah.
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 But yeah, I mean, I last year I kind of made a lot of mistakes in terms of, every session I wanted to hit certain goals, and every session I wanted to sort of smash. And looking back, I think there's a lot to be said for, if you're looking at a training block, pick out early where you want to go all in, because that's really where you're going to hopefully manage your risk of overtraining. And I do that with clients. I go, right, a month out, this is what the month looks like top line. Should we go to the well, so to speak? Like, where are we going to push? And then with the other sessions, we can just be a little bit conservative, because you can't go to the well every session you do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that plays into also the individual. So if you love doing a certain type of, like, I've got one client hates hills, absolutely hates them. So there isn't a huge amount of point in making him do hills that often,
Yeah.
because he can get the same sort of fitness gains out of other things. So I think it's with like 10K training, if you're looking at what you probably want to tick off in a month, prioritize those key sessions, and then give yourself a little bit of sort of, be a bit more kind around maybe some of the other sessions.
And in between, how do you view like all the easy stuff in between? Is there a rest, like a lot of easy running, and what about recovery? Do you recommend also cross training quite a lot, similar to how you were describing in your training week example?
I think it's super individual. I think some runners and some of the girls I'm sort of a similar level to just seem to, they do a heap of miles and it just works really well for them. Of course, not too many of them can be difficult. I think the rule is 80-20. It is a guide.
Yep.
So 20% of what you do should be hard. And I say hard meaning depending on the level of runner, but if you're a pretty good runner, that's marathon pace and down. So some people, mileage just works brilliantly. And if it's working for you, providing you're managing kind of that high intensity balance, you probably don't need to do a heap of cross training. But then there's other athletes, and I would include myself in that, their body just doesn't handle mileage brilliantly. And actually, I also don't think you necessarily get any fitter from it. Like, I look back last year and I was just as fit running 90K as I was 160. And for me, cross training works really well. So I think, and again, I use this with anyone I coach, cross training can be amazing, but it isn't for everyone, or it doesn't have to be for everyone. I think strength and conditioning should be for everyone, is my opinion. If you want to, if you're serious about improving. But yeah, I guess is sort of from a how much should be easy point of view. If it's full weight bearing running, 80%. If you're, again, if you're, it depends on the level, because if you're more of a beginner runner and you're running 30K a week, you don't necessarily need to keep that 80-20 balance quite as strictly. But if you're if you're trying to sort of knock on the sort of competitive times door, and you're running decent mileage, 20% hard is a good barometer. And a lot of the research says you get a huge amount of benefit from cardiovascularly from easy running. So there's no real gain spending too much time in that middle zone.
And the middle zone is like, how do you describe the middle zone? I've often thought about this, like, is when say you do a long run and it's like, or maybe like just a midweek run. It's, how do you describe that effort?
So someone said to me, when you get home, if you've run easy enough, you should feel refreshed. Or if you've run hard enough, you should feel cooked.
Yeah.
And if you feel somewhere in the middle, you're running in the middle. That said, obviously there's other factors there, but I get, if you wanted to sort of talk numbers, I guess it sits maybe between, if you said steady pace was 30 to 40 seconds slower than marathon pace, or maybe 30, then maybe in the middle, sort of 10 to 15 seconds slower than marathon pace, maybe. Some runners. It's super subjective, but I think if you're not sort of having an easy enough time that could have a conversation, then you're probably not easy running. And we've all seen it, like a 50-minute 10K runner doing a 5:10 run and saying recovery run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's an interesting one from a coaching point of view, because I have such a hard time trying to get people to slow down.
Sorry.
Enough.
I was going to say, I think the cross training as well is also like a hidden gem that everyone overlooks. Like, everyone's just so focused on their mileage. But I found like when I was the fittest sort of last year, I was doing more cross training and stuff just because the sessions were so brutal. Like, I couldn't even do the easy runs that I wanted to do. But I felt like I got the fittest I'd ever been from it. Same with the weights as well. Like, I don't know. I think most people find that stuff pretty boring, but if you want to get fit, like, that's kind of what you need to do, and there's so much value in it. I think it's a really good point.
I think because that was when you ran the 10K Sydney Harbour 10 Dom, and I remember your mileage coming down, and in my head, because I was still stuck in that sort of volume mindset, I'm like, oh, is it going to lose fitness, or I actually thought that, but like, no, the way Jerome basically sharpened everything up, and like, sort of like you said, we're doing cross training, and you ran like just incredible time. So it's I think, like, I've personally defaulted to thinking more, like, just run more, and like it's not working, which is why I'm changing my approach, like, because I've actually plateaued for a long period, or stayed at the same sort of level for a long period of time, and that's probably like more is not necessarily better, maybe.
I think you can get a lot out of cross training by being a bit like by always
Mm.
looking through a running lens. So Jess Tren talked about this a little bit. She was saying how much she did on the elliptical in the build up to her marathon, and she ran amazingly. Um, and what she thought was that when you're on the elliptical, the
Mm.
cross trainer, you're working really hard through your posterior chain. So your glutes have to fire to get that thing going,
Yeah.
which, you know, a lot of
Mm.
runners have issues with lazy glutes not firing, not activating, etc. So I think because if you're looking at it through that lens, you know, it's basically running but with better form and taking a little bit less out your body.
Mm.
And then the same with the bike. Like if you can get up on a bike and be doing,
Mm.
you know, fairly light resistance but fairly quick turnover hills, that's super relevant to running because running's generating power off the ground
Yeah.
as quickly as you
Yeah.
can, right? So, and that's what you're doing if you're out the saddle on a bike. So you can be pretty smart swimming. If I do some swimming where I don't breathe as often as usual, so if you swim, if you normally take breathe every three breaths, try breathing every 5, every 7. So you're teaching your body to train better with less oxygen.
Mm.
Um, so you can sort of cross train with a running lens, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely a lot to it. I think it's yeah, kind of like an untapped area in running. Most people just focus on their Ks. um,
What were you typically doing,
I
Dom,
was,
like cross training
yeah,
wise?
mostly on the bike, but I found kind of similar to what you said. Just your cadence on the bike is so much quicker than when you're running. So I found like that really carried through to my running because I felt like my body was used to moving at that rhythm. So like neurologically, maybe I was able to just get
Yeah,
a bit better leg turnover without really focusing on it too much. So
yeah,
I think that really helped. And then I was doing a lot more gym work than I'd ever done as well. So I just felt really powerful and strong when I was running, which I think a lot of runners they do too much running and then they start feeling weak because like I think that running can be catabolic and kind of breaks down your muscles, whereas strength training is metabolic and helps build them up. So if you're not doing the strength work, you
yeah.
can be kind of just getting a bit weak sometimes.
And I think was Paddy saying how most runners don't know what it feels like to feel strong.
Mm.
And I think there's so much in that. I think we get quite used to getting out of bed and just being quite sore. And that's sort of okay.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if you can feel strong and resilient and efficient when you're running, to me, like that's huge. Like and again, any athlete worth their salt, really, if you look at the top, is pretty hot on strength and conditioning from what I can see. So yeah, I'm a big fan. Um, yeah, but also I think with weights, it's also like it's talking to someone who knows their stuff because
Mm,
you know enough to help athletes a little bit, but I'm not a strength and conditioning coach. And having had conversations with the guys in this, I'm going to 4D in the city, and it's so individual because if you think like I've always thought I've got really strong quads, right? And they probably are quite strong, but the chances are if you've got a really strong body part, you've got a really weak one because
Mm.
the whole system is
mm,
compensatory.
Yep.
So someone who can look at you specifically, you know, you Luke as a runner,
Mm.
and go right. How do you move? Where are you compensating? Where are you
mm,
weak? And then write you a program based on that. I think is invaluable because otherwise it basically ends up being, which is better than nothing. Don't get me wrong, but if you're going to go, otherwise people go to the gym, they do some squats, some deadlifts, some calf raises, and that is great. That is better
yeah,
than nothing. But we would never run like that. We would never go out and go, right, well, I'm going to go and just run for 30 minutes twice a
yeah,
week. You
yeah,
know,
definitely.
Yeah.
Mm,
we spend so much time creating these really creative sessions, but then a lot of people go and do the exact same thing in the gym.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
a really good point. Yeah,
Everyone said the same thing with strength. Like it's so important, and it's a good point. It's a really good point you make. Anything I watch on YouTube and any professional, like there's always a very strong emphasis on strength and conditioning, which makes me, yeah, I really should focus more on that myself.
Well, I'll hold my hands up. It's a lot of it's this year out of a big injury.
Yeah.
So I think it does take sometimes people. You only get onto it when you have to.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I think, and because we all want to run well, I think well into our 40s,
Yeah.
if not 50s.
Yeah.
And its strength is, I think, probably the way to do that, because otherwise your body just can't maintain that level forever.
It's a good point. Yeah. What is that?
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
Big fan of strength.
What did Patty say? You can't go wrong with being strong. I like that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Nice.
I guess a more general question. Like when you're in a training block, what do you typically enjoy the most about training?
So I definitely love the social side. I feel like that's a given. Yeah, I think it was Alex saying, because people say, oh, how can you run so many Ks? He said, well, actually, a lot of it's just
Yeah.
chatting, and the miles just fly by. So I do love that, but I also love the feeling that your body just did something it couldn't do 2 weeks ago. Like I think again that probably comes from my
Yeah.
childhood where we were all like, we must get
Yeah.
faster at everything. But it's pretty cool, I think, when you can. And I see the athletes I coach. I see how great it makes them feel when they've just done a session they did 3 weeks ago and they've smashed it. I love that progress with running that you don't necessarily get in such a measurable way in other sports. Yeah, I think I mean there's days when you don't want to get out the door.
Yeah.
And you sort of just get it done. But on a day where you feel great and you because I've not done so much racing, I feel like a lot of my sort of progress memories are actually training sessions where I've gone, wow, I'm in shape I've never been in before. And all that work is paid off. So that's got to be a real high, I think, in a block.
It's an incredible feeling doing, like for me at least, doing a threshold session like fast or faster than you've done before, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm getting fit, and then you sort of reflect on it, and you're like, okay, what did I do to get fit? And you just go in this loop, and it makes you feel, there is like a massive buzz about it.
Yeah, 100%. And if people around you are doing the same, so yeah, my partner Gareth he's sort of got more into running through me. I mean, he doesn't really have a massive choice, but but yeah, and I can see now we're both building up to London Marathon this year, and I can see it gives him such a kick as well. And then training partners and meeting people and going on that journey with them.
Yeah.
I think if you really go to the well with someone in a training block, if you're like for me, you might know Josh, Dom, Josh Arthur. He's a very solid runner actually.
Yeah.
And we've always talked about doing sub 240 together. We haven't quite got there yet because one of us keeps getting it, but one day we will. And but every time we've been through a block together, if you've just floored yourself alongside a mate, that's a pretty cool feeling, I think.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, 100%. Dom and I have gone through similar thing.
Yeah.
In our first, or sort of my first training block is doing hard. Like I'll never forget doing those sort of hard long runs with Dom. Yeah, like, and you just cooked at the end, but
yeah,
I've talked about this before. Like Dom is just, like I had to stretch so much as well, so it's been good. It's been good for me, personally. But doing it together, like, or some of the Friday sessions we would do at Meadowbank, Dom, like just some of the most memorable stuff. Doing that together is one of the massive things about running.
Yeah.
So
it's quite a unique feeling, I think, when you train alongside someone and then have a beer alongside them, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think like it helps build like such a deeper relationship as well. Like me and Smitty became like really really good friends through running together, whereas like before we were kind of mates and stuff, but not to the same level that we are now, I think. But it's pretty special training with someone and going through that pain with someone.
And I think as well, you need friends who kind of get it. Like, particularly when I was injured, I wasn't the easiest to be around, to be honest. And I think, I've got amazing friends and they were amazing, but it's quite hard to explain how much running means and how much
Yeah.
of a hole it leaves when it's not there
Mm.
to non-runners. And I think that's really where you see the community when you're sort of forced out for a period. That's when you really recognize how special it is having close friends or a community where you have that massive shared kind of interest and shared love.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Just getting injured is
sucks.
the worst, and it's funny you say that. Like people can't get it because it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
just stop running for a bit, and you're like, no, you don't,
Yeah.
don't understand. Like we've been training for a fucking year
Yeah.
or something, and like, or you've just been fantasizing
Yeah.
over like running a certain time for like 3 months, and then
Yeah.
you're just okay, no more running, and you're just like, no,
Yeah.
that doesn't compute
No,
with
it doesn't.
what I want to do.
Yeah. And people say, oh, just do something else for a bit, focus on work.
Like, thanks.
If one more person told me to focus on work, I was
I
absolutely
know. And then sometimes you're like, oh God, why am I taking this running thing so
yeah.
seriously? But then, or like, I remember we've had times where I'm like, why am I running so much? What's the point? And then you take a week off, like voluntarily, and you feel what the week's like without running. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, that's why.
Yeah.
Because I love running.
Yeah, I just suddenly have way too much time on my hands.
Yep. And you don't, there's something about that's like putting your body through that stress and coming out the other side that's like gives you a week structure and just makes you feel good.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the problem because when I got injured, the gyms were still closed and the pools were closed.
Oh
Mm.
yeah.
And it was the middle of winter. So the only real, and I was actually on crutches. So the only real option, well, when I was on crutches, it was nothing because you can't really go in the ocean.
Yeah.
And then when I was off crutches, we did a bit of ocean swimming. But I think I probably underestimated how big a role that played in everything because I think just being able to push yourself, like if you can at least get on a bike, if you can at least, smash out a session in the pool, whatever it is, I think it takes away a layer of stress. You sort of you leave it then at the gym or in the pool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think you
Massively.
underestimate how much your body is addicted to that feeling of pushing yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's like when you come, it's almost like, yeah, you addicted
Yeah,
because yeah,
I'm convinced running's an addiction for sure.
it is because you just feel good after it, and it's funny before you go into it, you're like, oh God, I don't want to go out.
Yeah,
Like I can't be bothered. Oh, really? I'm gonna do 6x2K
yeah,
after a full day of work, really?
Yeah.
And then you go out
yeah,
and you do it, and you're like, that was incredible, and
yeah,
you're just kind of in awe of especially if it's a good session.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
progress is addictive, isn't it? Like if you're
mm,
progressing, super addictive, and that's probably where
yeah,
everyone gets into overtraining territory because
mm,
you get too fit for what your body can handle.
Mm.
Um, and it's so addictive, when your times start coming
it
down
is.
almost every session you do,
Yeah.
you just want to do more and more and more. And you're like, wow, I can really mix it up with people I've always thought are way out my league.
Yeah.
Um,
What
and then, yeah, bam.
what's your thoughts on that in general, Dom? Like the high from training and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like yeah, it's incredible, and I think it just puts you in a good headspace. Like even just getting out for like I find a 20-minute run, like which I've been doing a lot of this week.
Mm.
I feel like my mood just improves so much, and yeah, it's definitely an addiction, like Rosie was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Rosie's like can speak to that improvement a fair bit because yeah, like her running has just gone to another level so quickly. Like she dropped 5 minutes off her 10K in a year, and we're still disappointed. um, yeah, so like yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
something that everyone kind of
I
chases.
think I don't know about you guys, but I feel like certain people have quite addictive personalities.
Mm-hmm.
I've
That's me.
never been able to do anything in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Um, I think, and that's probably a learning I'm still figuring out. But I feel like I, get so into things, and I think that's quite typical kind of personality for a runner.
Yeah.
100%.
This is why I've had 4 months off drinking.
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. And I've done the same. Although I'm not actually. I've had 3 years of trying to run fast, and I'm convinced that giving up drinking doesn't help at all.
Really?
Oh, don't tell me that. I'm on a good streak. I'm on a good streak.
Maybe for you.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, I think it's just super. I got so into it so quickly, and 4 months in to even training regularly, I actually quit my job. I was like, I want to work in fitness. I want to work in running. So I got pretty much as I'd like to say, I made really quick progress with a very normal level of effort. I got pretty committed pretty quick as well.
Definitely. And yeah, you said that you're still drinking. What's like your kind of thoughts on nutrition, and do you have any kind of principles around how you're fueling your running, and what your sort of process is to support your running?
Yeah. I mean, I should caveat. I'm not drinking.
Oh, you're not. Oh, sorry.
Otherwise, I am drinking, but I'm not drinking. Like I used to.
Quick disclaimer, yeah, like when I'm talking drinking, I'm talking binge drinking.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not drinking like I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me. I'm like, okay, you got to slow this thing down, otherwise, what's the point of training?
So nutrition wise, I sort of have a lens now of just a fear of injury. So I'm definitely all about kind of, I'd rather over fuel than under fuel. So I'm quite big on just like volume, getting food in. I think there's probably the fact is you probably are a little bit quicker if you're at your very, very lightest you can be whilst being healthy.
Yeah.
But I'd rather sort of sit on the slightly cautious side from an injury point of view. So
Definitely.
I'm pretty big on just getting food in. And I guess the rules I really set are more around timing than what I'm eating. There's certain obvious ones, like I'm not probably going to have a cheese platter the night before a big run, but yeah, that's backfired before.
Speaking from experience.
But yeah, I'm as soon as I finish a hard run, I'm within 30 minutes I've had protein with carbs. Doesn't really matter what it is, even like a big milky coffee with honey is better than nothing. And I would never really run hard without having had something, just because of those glycogen levels. So I don't really personally find I can run well if I've got nothing in my system. I remember times leaving the house with Gaz, and we'd be late because I'd be like inhaling a bagel, like as we were jogging. And he's like, "You're ridiculous." But yeah, so it's more around timings than specific things. I got my stress fracture, I got the guidance to try and take on 150 grams of protein a day, which actually, when you lay it out, it's quite a lot. So that's probably the one kind of quantifiable macro goal I have. But yeah, I'm sort of like, if you can stomach it, take on as much fuel as you can really before and after training, hard training. And just be smart around what works for your body. Like really rich food that takes a long time to digest, not going to be a great idea the day before a race. I find energy gels work pretty well. I'm a Morton girl at the moment. And I've been trying to take a bit with the humidity. I try and take electrolytes on a bit more, but no hard and fast rules. Just listen to your body, and just get fuel on. Basically, it's just not worth the risk, I don't think.
Yeah, I was listening. I listened to a podcast episode with Ryan Hall, who was talking about because a lot of people assume when you were running, he was running 110 miles. So I'm not sure what that translates to, but it's a lot per week. Obviously, he's at a completely different level, like US. I think he's still got the US marathon. Like record, all-time record, 204 marathon and sub 60 half. Anyway, he was talking about diet. And it's like you wouldn't expect he was really strict on his diet and had to cut weight like quite heavily. And he said it just was so unhealthy. And that's why he's actually weight training at the
Yeah.
moment. Well, that's a whole separate thing. But what's your
Yeah.
view on like how it can, because it can get unhealthy sometimes if you're not eating enough, or if you're worried about your weight, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing, and I think luckily people are talking a lot more openly about it now. But you guys, I'm sure, have heard of RED, so relative energy deficiency.
Mm.
Basically, athletes or people training at high volumes, eating like a normal person, essentially. So
Yeah.
you're not under eating, but you are under eating for your activity level. Um, and I probably shouldn't stereotype, but I think particularly with women, to a certain point, being super light, you're going to run pretty well, but probably for a sustained
Mm.
period.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, it's not worth the long term injury risk. And you're probably going to run into sort of bone health issues. And the second you've got bone health issues as a runner, there's a
Mm.
big challenge to
Yeah.
overcome. So to me, it's always worth sort of, you know, taking on more than probably you think you need. Um, and just because if race weight, I think Jen Lacaz has talked about this, but race weight is fine for your period of your race.
Mm.
But too many people probably sit around race weight across the year, and you're just hovering above what's
Yeah.
healthy. Um, and hovering above what's healthy on a long term basis isn't
Mm.
healthy.
Mm.
Um, that's my view. I've found I don't particularly run any better if I'm 3 kilos lighter. But
Mm.
I do make myself more prone
Mm.
to injury. Um, so to me, it's worth sort of, yeah, just being conscious of what you don't underestimate how much you're actually putting your body through if you're running a lot of miles. It's a huge amount of load. There's a reason that professional swimmers swim, they have double the training hours of professional runners because
Yeah.
so much load on your body.
Yeah.
Um, and you're burning so many calories, and just need to make sure you're taking them on and not overthinking it. I think a lot of people, and I have this a lot with athletes who I work with, they want me to give them hard and fast, macro goals and micro goals and rules to stick by. And I don't think it should be like that. I think it should be a bit more on feel. Like if
Yeah.
you're hungry, you probably need
Yeah.
to eat.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like
Hundred
don't
percent.
fight it. If you're
Yeah.
hungry, eat. Um, and don't get too caught up on rules. I think just try and kind of make sure you're taking on enough and generally the right things. And the one rule I think people should adopt is timing. Don't
Mm.
wait 5 hours after a big
Mm.
run to have a big meal. It's crazy. You've just lost your
Yeah.
window to repair properly.
Yeah. That's talked about quite a lot. Is the time, like, what if you're gonna go specific? What sort of guidelines would you recommend in terms of timing after a session or something like that?
So it depends what you can stomach. I've always found I've got a stomach of steel. Like I can literally be eating a bagel as I'm warming up. So I'm probably a little bit unusual, but typically you want to take on something that's carb based with a small amount of protein within
Yep.
45 minutes of starting a harder session.
Mm-hmm.
Um, within when you've finished a session, you want to take on protein with a little bit of carbs within 30 minutes, I would say, and then a proper meal within 3 hours with fats, carbs, protein.
Because
Um,
that's when the body sort of um, needs the fuel to then deliver recovery, essentially.
yeah, so your glycogen stores just sit in your muscles here, and then
Mm.
when you run hard or train hard, they just deplete, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got this window after training to top them up. And the longer you leave it, the less
Mm.
efficient the top up, if that makes sense.
Right.
So the sooner you can get fuel in, um, the better, really. And the other tip I got that's quite good is if you were struggling with recovery, if you're just waking up and every day you're just still sore, still cooked, try having a
Mm.
bit of protein actually just before you go to bed, because
Yep.
overnight your body's going through all the repair processes. And if you've got that protein just really readily available, that repair is
Yep.
just going to
Mm.
be that bit better.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, those are sort of quite good rules, I think, that I try and adopt as much as
Mm.
possible.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay, we've talked a lot about sort of training and sessions, which is good. Um, what about if we can just generally touch on sort of your coaching? When did that start, and like, how many athletes do you have? What does that look like at the moment?
So it kind of coincided. It was 2019. I started running more.
Yep.
And then in the June of that year, it probably like there were a few different factors that sort of came together at the same time. I was working in advertising at the time, and it had just become quite soulless. I was working for a big agency for big clients, and basically just sort of flogging myself to make rich companies slightly richer.
Mm.
Um, and I just lost sort of the love of it. It was a great career in my 20s because it was, lots of perks, lots of nice lunches, lots of free beer, and which was great.
Yeah.
But it sort of ran its course, and I think that probably coincided with, when I mentioned earlier, but running just became like got supercharged into my life, and I just wanted to talk about it all day and do it all day, and
Yeah.
help people do it all day. Um, and I'd also coached in the past, so I used to do a lot of windsurfing. Do you know what I mean when I say windsurfing?
Yeah, with the sail and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
the board and the sail.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So I used to do that a lot, and I used to coach that in Greece. So I knew I liked coaching people, and I get a real kick out of like working out what makes people tick. I've
Mm.
always loved that psychology side of things. So I'm really impulsive, and I literally just came home on the Friday night and I said, I think I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna start a coaching
Wow.
business. And Gaz said, yeah, great, cool. But I don't think he realized I meant on the Monday. Um, so
So there's gonna be planning and like, let's strategize for a few months.
Jeez, yeah,
yeah,
straight in the deep
yeah,
end.
I love that.
jump ship. And I came home and told him, and I think he was like, wow, that, that was really fast. Have you thought this through? Like, we don't really have, a second source of income, etc. But ultimately, it probably was quite impulsive given I didn't have any income from it at that
Yeah.
point. But what sort of ended up happening was that it started out just with mates, and it's grown quite organically. And I work at a physio now, so I've got a salary, um, and it's basically grown from, it was sort of two or three for a while. Then it grew to like 30. It grew quite a lot.
Yeah,
Mm.
And then off the back of lockdown, it's sort of regressed slightly now, sits between 10 and 15.
Hmm.
Um, but they're runners from the UK, Australia, and the States. So it's quite good because it's sort of quite, you've got people everywhere. Um, and I think what I've realized is that I absolutely love it. And in 20 years' time, if I could make a business out a sustainable business where that was all I did, that would be amazing. But for now, I'm pretty happy with it to retain like the quality of service and have something else I rely on financially,
Yeah.
um, and sort of just chip away at it, because I don't want to say yes to any person who wants to be coached by me, because sometimes it just isn't going to be a good fit.
mm,
Yep. Yep.
Um, so it's sort of worked itself out into quite a nice, um, I guess, business in a way, but more of a sort of passion project.
Mm.
Um, with, yeah, just such diverse runners. I mean, I've got guys running sub 3 hours, who I could train alongside. Um, and then I've got, a lady came to me 2 years ago. She'd never run a kilometer, and now she's doing 10K races. So um, it's pretty cool. And people, like the biggest thing I've learned from coaching is you have to be open minded, because
Mm.
people can surprise you. And it's quite inspiring. People can be so gritty,
mm.
and you wouldn't have called it when you met them. So it's,
Yeah.
it's it's a pretty cool thing to do. Yeah, the only kind of rule I have is I try and take people on who want to target, who sort of have more of a performance goal than a body composition goal.
Yeah.
Sometimes people come and they say, I want to lose 15 kilos, and I think running's the way to go.
Mm.
And that's absolutely, great. That's a great goal, but I'm just not the right person for you. So I try and sort of, keep goals measurable in a kind of progress point of view rather than a general health point of
Yeah.
view.
Is that because you want to, obviously you're passionate? This is just my guess. You're passionate about the specifics behind it, and if someone just wants to lose weight, they're not going to be focusing on nailing sessions, all this sort of stuff. Maybe in a way.
I think there's a few factors. It's not my skill set for a start.
Yeah.
I'm not a dietitian. I technically am qualified as a PT, but it's not what I want to
Yeah.
do.
Mm.
And I tend to find people get more out of, fitness and sport if they have goals that are built around positive, positive kind of barometers rather than, weight loss is a great goal. It's just I find people can kind of longevity and that sort of intrinsic motivation is better if people are setting goals about what their body can do, not what it looks
Yes.
like.
Yes.
So for me, it's more aligned to what I can offer them. They're gonna get a better service if it's more of a sort of performance program, and it's more what I'm passionate about. So, yeah, I think that's probably probably reason I'd say no to someone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think Jerome touched on it, but how individual people are, and I say to people if they want to be coached by me, my job really is to make running fit into their life. Because the second it becomes too difficult with kids or too rigid with kids or a partner or work or they travel a lot for work, that's the second it becomes unsustainable.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's making training seamless. It's not rocket science. You can put together a decent training week if you're a good runner. But really, I think the value for them comes a lot of the time in retrofitting it to their life, their lifestyle, their background, even what they like doing.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking as well. Like there must be a great joy in just seeing people improve as well. We talked about our own personal journeys. That might even be a new level when you've like sort of worked with someone and they're also, and then you can see that journey. I just imagine that would be awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's super cool. Because particularly people who are quite hard on themselves, because you get some people and they're like I would never be able to run 10K. I would just, it's just not something I'll be able to do, particularly if they've started running later in life. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty cool thing if you're able to help someone feel like they've accomplished something.
Yeah.
And they're just that bit more confident about themselves actually. I think that's pretty unique. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. What about, just quickly before we sort of start wrapping up? What are your future plans? What's next? So you are training for a
London,
marathon?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
London. So we're doing London in October. And I'd like to run fast there if I can.
Yeah.
Because I've only done one marathon and it was sort of an off road. Well, it wasn't actually. It was on road, but it had stairs and things. And it was 3 bridges out at Parramatta.
Yeah.
So I want to do a big marathon with crowds and try and have a decent lead into that. And then run. I'd really like to run fast. I just want to run fast.
Yeah. That's the bug we all have. Just want to run fast.
Just faster.
I
No, I
know.
want to try and knock out, do a 5K race, do a successful 10K race, because I got into the type of shape I was in last winter. I just don't think there was no opportunity to sort of put it out there.
Yep.
So I want to get back into that kind of shape and then just race and get experience racing and hopefully get my times down, ideally across the board. And then, yeah, London sort of is the big goal. But I think if you're in good marathon shape, you really should be in good 5:10 and a half shape, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just keep getting faster for 10 years.
I think we're all aligned in that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, I try and be quite optimistic. I've been running quite a lot, but only for 3 years. And a lot of the girls I'm trying to mix it up with have been doing it for longer. I've made some, terrible mistakes training wise, and I've tried to learn from them each time. So I'm just excited every year to sort of reshape how I'm going about things. And hopefully that means continue progressing. I don't think I'll ever get in, not they're amazing, but I think I'm always going to be pulled in by like getting faster over the distances rather than into the ultra territory.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Um,
I was thinking the same way.
oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
until I did a few marathons, and it's like, oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
do? You got the bug?
definitely.
Yeah, maybe. But I think if I do go, I think what I'll end up doing is probably Ironman.
Mm.
When I stop getting faster on the road, I think I'll get sucked into that because my family are very into it, and my brother and my dad, and my dad's trying to mix it up with all the 25-year-old, my brother and all his mates, and they're all doing the Ironman. So there's lots of family league tables going around.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, I think long term I probably would want to try my hand at that, but in the short term I want to keep growing the coaching business sort of slowly. Keep trying to run fast. And yeah, have quite a bit of fun along the way. Really, I want to run in some cool places and just race some cool races.
Mm. And wrapping up, there's a question we've been asking everyone on the show. Yeah, what's your favourite race been so far?
So I was thinking about this earlier. I haven't done that many, and I think every single one I've done, I've got a PB. I think
Wow,
because
that's a pretty good record.
Yeah.
which is cool. But because I haven't done so many. But we did Melbourne half in 2019, both of us, and at the time my PB was 134, and I ran 126
Wow.
that day. And it was an amazing race. We finished in the MCG. Gaz got a massive PB as well. So it was just one of those sort of days where you both run well, which means the beers afterwards are a bit more fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I was I remember crossing that line, and that was probably the first time I can remember that real race high, just being like, wow, that's such a big difference in what I was doing,
Yeah.
last time. That was pretty cool. And the other thing about that race was that I was really proud of how I kind of dug in, because it was starting to really hurt around the 12K mark, and I just the best tip I got was don't look at when it starts to hurt, stop looking at your watch.
Yeah.
So I just didn't look at my watch between 12 and 20, and yeah, it was highly recommend if a race is going wrong, don't look at the watch. But yeah, that was just a great day in lots of ways, and it was probably my first race, I think, since I'd started, training. So it would have to be that one at the moment, but I'm hoping London,
Yeah.
if it all goes to plan.
Crazy. I think
Yeah.
you actually beat me in that race.
Did I?
Yeah, I was me and
Wow.
Smitty were down there. Smitty did his first marathon, and I did the half marathon as
Yeah.
well.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah, I was feeling a bit sick, so I went out kind of like on target, and then was just like, no, like I feel like terrible, and just jogged it in. But I ran
That
128.
might be a first and a last, I think, but I'll take it.
I love how you said you went out on track. You went out a bit quick.
We've all learned, right? Like everyone's done it.
Oh,
You got
yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
only really
definitely.
know how much you shouldn't do it until you've done it. After you've done
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
it. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. It's been an awesome episode. Lots of insight into the 10K, and also just in general into what it's like to run and what it feels like to really get into running. So, thank you for joining us. It was
No,
awesome.
thanks, guys. It's been great. I'm sure I'll see you out there soon. But yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been awesome.
Yeah.